Can a film that was neither intended nor described to be feministic by its own director be a feminist film? If one Googles feminist film nowadays, there's a good chance to find the 1966 film Daisies quite at the top of some lists. And why not? It is a film made by a woman focusing on two women, portraying them mocking men. What should not be feministic about that? The only problem is that this female director, Věra Chytilová, has explicitly noted that she's not a feminist and neither is her film. So what now? Can such a film nevertheless be feministic? Can the meaning of a film evolve over time? What is a feminist film to begin with? What impact has the political opinion of the director for a film, or her gender? I will try to find answers to these questions in the next couple of minutes. Daisies is the most popular film from the Czech New Wave. It was made in 1966 and quite immediately banned, officially for its wastage of food in a time when the Soviet Union was struggling with its agricultural production. It pictures two women, marry one and marry two, that decide to become spoiled as the world is spoiled too. These two women meander through society, always together, always mirroring each other. They let themselves be wooed by older and wealthier men, only to rip them off their food and wave them goodbye at the train station, where they inevitably will debark when the girls have lost their interest. For these Marys don't long for men or wealth, but only the most existential pleasure, food. This unconventional plotline, joined with the revolutionary editing, could well be considered feminist, and was indeed by multiple critics. Richard He called it a joyful feminist revenge fantasy. Felicia Ellett concludes it is definitely a feminist film, and Jurish Jambu compares it with Me Too and the Riot Girls. However, the director had another opinion. Věra Chytilová has always maintained that she intended the film to be a critique of its protagonists, who she defined as parasites. She further denied to be a feminist herself, but considered herself to be an individualist. When asked about feminism portrayed in her films, she explicitly said, "I'm not interested in women and women's problems." But what does that mean for the film? Are all these critics wrong? The question what makes a film feministic is highly debated. Some suggest simple tests, such as the Bechdel test or the Makomori test. While the first asks if there are at least two female characters talking to each other about something else than men, the second test demands a female character who gets her own narrative arc that is not about supporting a man's story. If this would be the sole criteria, Daisies would easily pass the test with flying flags. However, many scholars oppose this approach and ask for much more intrinsic criteria. Jade Budowski suggests that a truly feminist film is consciously made and intends to get the audience thinking about equal rights for women and how women move through the world on a day-to-day basis. A film is feminist because it means to be. Similarly, the filmmaker Anna Billes contends that to be feminist, a movie has to have the express purpose of educating its audience about social inequality between men and women. What does that mean for Daisies? To find an answer for this question, one first has to engage with the director herself. Věra Chytilová was born in 1929 and is considered a pioneer of Czech cinema. Before she became a director, she worked among others as a draftswoman and a fashion model. When she was 28 years old, she became the first woman to study at the prestigious Film Academy in Prague and soon became a renowned director in the Czech film scene. After she released Daisies, she was barred from filmmaking from 1969 until 1975 due to her active criticism of the Soviet Union and the food wastage and anti-Soviet tendencies portrayed by Daisies. She, however, suggested that the real problem lay elsewhere. She was a female film director. The story of her career before Daisies creates the image of a strong political woman struggling within a male-dominated industry. But Věra Chytilová was no feminist and didn't want her films to be. Can an artwork be analyzed regardless of the author? If one examines scenes of Daisies closer, one is tempted to say yes. For one, there's the theory of what is called the female gaze. As reaction to Laura Mulvey's theory of the male gaze, that is the perspective of a filmmaker and viewer which dominated the film industry for years, the female gaze includes films that are made by women and represent women from a female perspective. In Daisies, this female perspective can be seen when Mary II changes dresses. Instead of the stereotypical sexualized undressing which has been portrayed in so many films, we see her in her undergarments, but not at all sexualized, putting her dress on without making any deal out of it. The same can be observed in the butterfly scene, when Mary II is wooed by an admirer. Although it would make sense if she inhabited the inferior position because she is naked and vulnerable, while the observing man is dressed, one gets the impression that she, in fact, is the dominant one in this relation. While usually the scene shows a stagnant male that is calmly observing a moving woman, here the male is nervous, while Mary II stays still. Moreover, multiple close-up shots focus on Mary II's face and reaction, while films that possess a male gaze rather would focus on the man's reaction in contrast to the woman's body. Another feature of feminist films is often the story of women among themselves. Films like Ingrid Bergman's Persona, Celine Sciammas Portrait of a Lady on Fire, or Nadine Labaki's Caramel observe the interaction between women that are without men. The portrayal of women among themselves in these films is quiet, observing, respectful. Whether we watch the convergence of Marianne and Eloise in Portrait of a Lady on Fire, the unilateral conversations in Persona, or the surreal discussions between Mary I and Mary II in Daisies, we always seem to engage in a private situation and an intimate converse of these characters. This privacy and intimacy is acknowledged and treated with respect, while it is never seen as something uncomfortable, but a natural state of being between the characters, normalizing women and their everyday life. Therefore, if we come back to the most strict criteria of feminist film designed by Budowski and Billers, does the film intend to make its audience think about the social situation of women and their social inequality with men? Its perspective certainly is a female perspective, its content one of two women making the best out of a male world and relying mainly on each other. Whether intended or not, while watching the film, one cannot help oneself but wondering about the strength and wittiness of the two heroines that so easily trick the old, rich, but ultimately naive man in their society. The display of two beautiful young women that don't care for anything but to eat as much as they can inevitably creates a counter-image to the ideal of a reserved woman that is prudent of her body. And while Chytilova declared not to be a feminist and not to care for women's problems, her life was shaped by a number of particular female problems in a male-dominated world, which was reflected in her films and the choice of her characters. In the end, it doesn't matter if the Marys symbolize evil or good. These women behave incredibly autonomous and self-confident for the time, and this alone leads to an embracement of the image of women in society. Therefore, the critics might be right after all. It is a feminist film, whether this label as such was intended or not.